Alright, picking up this project right where I left it at the end of part 1. Now, since the rafters are exposed, I went ahead and took the opportunity and put in some light boxes so that later on I can add in some recessed lighting. But with the rafters exposed, I did go ahead and run all of the Romex to the boxes that I'll need. And I got lucky because I already had lights out here. So it was a simple matter of adding in a few junction boxes, light boxes, and running the wire. Now, I have seen a lot of awnings or verandas where the rafters are left exposed, but I personally wanted to close mine in and add some decking to the underside. And I did this with some thinner plywood that has paneling on one side. I would first cut it to size with the circular saw and try to work it into place. Now, this is definitely a two-person job, but once it's wrangled into place, then it can be nailed down to the rafters. And I made this a little bit easier on myself by marking the rafter locations on the inside of the header. And of course, since I'm adding in lights, I had to locate where those light boxes fell on this decking and cut them out before installing it.
Come back my way. Come back your way.
What do you mean, toward the building?
And it was great timing because our neighbor and buddy, Forrest, ended up stopping by. So we actually ended up with 3 pairs of hands. And it made this part of the job go a lot quicker.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ta-da!
I'm pretty good about finding ways to do things by myself, but I honestly don't know of a way I would have been able to handle this portion of the project all by myself. Once all the decking was thrown up, then I moved on to adding the trim. Now for the back wall, I added some simple 1x material. However, for the front and the sides, I added some quarter round material. And I did go ahead and miter these ends just to give it a little bit sharper of a look. And I used my brad nail in order to attach it. With all that top trim done, then I moved down to trimming out the bottom of the post. I originally thought to use a 2x8 for the bottom and then either a 2x6 or a 2x4 for the top. However, I didn't want them to be flush with one another, so I decided to take a scrap piece of material and tuck it behind the 2x8 in order to push it out from the post just slightly, create an offset for that top piece. But with all of the posts being on ground that's at a slope, I would first cut the sideboards to rough dimension, place the board at level, and then measure the gap that it created. I would then take off that amount of material on the other side with my miter saw so that I could then have the piece setting flush on the ground, but it still be level on the top. Then in order to get the angles that the sides needed to be cut at, I would simply place the board that will become the front piece in place and then trace out what needs to be cut off. Once all 4 boards were flush to one another, I then started putting it together with some screws. Definitely utilizing clamps on the final piece in order to make sure everything was lined up and square before screwing it together. Then to attach it to the post, I simply put in 2 screws on the back side of things. It was at this point, looking at the finished box, that I decided to change up the top trim. I ended up going with 1x material with mitered ends. I would cut all 4 and dry fit it before actually attaching it into place. Then, with all of the trim done, I started on the final detail work, going through and caulking all of the trim along the top, giving all of the cedar a light sanding since it is pretty fuzzy material, and then coming through and painting the ceiling. And then after that had time to dry, then I could come back and finish the installation of the actual light fixtures. Now, I only went with 6 lights for the entire space. They might not look like much during the day, but at night they certainly put out a great amount of light. Then with everything looking so new and shiny, it really highlighted just how kind of scuffy this barn looks. So I decided to go ahead and give everything a new coat of paint.
Okay, and I think that's gonna wrap up this project. Now, I still want to come back and stain the cedar in order to match the fence, but this weather is just simply not cooperating with me. But I can't be more pleased with the way that this project turned out. I hope that you enjoyed watching me tackle such a large and new project for me. Of course, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I will see you on whatever it is I'm working on next.